you're good to go.
Yep.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Talk to Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle C. Baker. And before we get started, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening and watching from. And if I sound like I'm giggly, it's just because I've been messing up the recording. So I'm just trying to compose myself. I have an amazing guest today of the author Kevin Blaize with me, and he's been a really good sport, trying not to laugh at me while I'm messing up my own intro. But I have the amazing Kevin, a great author. I'm going to put the spotlight on him so that he could tell his story, but he has an incredible message to kind of share with the world, and I think everybody needs to hear that. So thank you so much, Kevin, for joining me and putting up with me this morning.
Thank you for having me, Danielle. I really appreciate you taking the time out to have me on your podcast. And it was my pleasure meeting you the other day in New York City. That was amazing. We got to take a picture. I got to get your book. And again, thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thank
I
you. Oh, go ahead.
really
Go ahead.
appreciate it.
Thank you. It was really great meeting you. It was such a great event too. It's just the energy in there was amazing. So I'm glad
Yes.
that we got to connect and that we're doing this today because you have great books. We'll talk about the books a little bit. So before we start what it is that you do, can you kind of briefly tell your story and how you got to where you are today?
Okay. Well, used to read a lot. I loved reading. I still love reading. I just don't get to do it as much as I used to because I more work on my projects now. But I used to read a lot, and I was reading a particular book. I had an idea that I was sitting on for a couple of years, and I was reading a particular book that was supposed to be not nonfiction, and I thought it was, let's say we're in 2025, and it was supposed to be from about 500 years earlier, and I just found it was a little too detailed, like something was a little off with it. And come to find, I said, all right, let me try my idea because I wasn't really getting into the book like I normally do. Like when I get into a book, I'm reading until 2, 3 in the morning. So I said, I'll
Mhm.
try my idea. Come to find out, I'm not going to mention the name of that book, but it ended up being plagiarized. So years later, we found out that the book was plagiarized. So I tried my idea and had no schooling, never knew I was going to be an author, never intended to be an author. It was not on my radar. I just had this idea. And once I started writing, I couldn't stop. And here we are 5 books later and trying to get to an animated or going to get to an animated movie and, making some waves as a relatively new author.
No, that's great. And no, you're right. When you get absorbed into a book, it kind of you lose track of time. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's good. 5 books. It's quite a lot of books for.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. You have an interesting take on creative writing, and so just can kind of share with us your take on creative writing and why you think it's important that we introduce that to the youth today.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Great question. I think it's very important because, one, I don't think anybody has better ideas or imaginations than the youngsters,
Yeah.
so instead of letting those ideas go to waste and then they become adults and they don't even remember the ideas that they had when they were young, let them know that they can actually do this kind of work. You know, they if they're not seeing anybody doing the work, they're not hearing anybody tell them that they can do the work, then they're never going to know that they can do it. So this is why, especially in New York, you have a lot of youngsters. They only think that they can be rappers and athletes because that's what they see. If they saw authors writing books that turned into the Shrek series. They show authors writing books that turned into Black Panther, Little Mermaid, Barbie. Then they would say, wait a minute, I can do this too because I see somebody doing it. But a lot of times they see authors on podcasts or on Good Morning America or on radio shows and they think that the author is perfect. They don't realize that the author started somewhere. So that's a major part of my mission is to I have a threefold mission to get my books into every school, to get my books into an animated trilogy, and to also get creative writers everywhere that I go. I want to create a bunch of creative writers everywhere that I go, and them seeing me as part of that mission.
Yeah. That's really good, and that's what I liked about your story is, and you actually made me realize you kind of go through life and you're not really give it too much thought, but you said it yourself. You kind of stumbled into writing.
Right,
Same story with me, and a lot of the authors I meet now. It's just it wasn't their planned
right,
life. It was just kind of stumbled into it. So it
yeah,
is true. You don't think it's not. We don't talk about it. And
yeah.
why would you think? Kind of like your take on this is why do you think it's important now more than ever um, to teach the younger generations the difference between being a creator and being a consumer? Because you mentioned all of the popular children's stories or movies, so we're consuming those. We're buying the books. We're going to see the movies. We're buying the merchandise. But why? What's your take on that? Why is it so important to teach kids now the difference between being creators or consumers?
Uh, Before we even go to that, the part about the author that you mentioned, not thinking that we would be authors,
Mhm.
big part of it is I don't know how it is with you, but I never met an author growing up. A
Mm.
lot of the schools that I go into now, I'm the first author that they meet, so that trend is continuing. So if they've never met authors, how would they know that they can do this work? Like authors seem unreal to them, almost as much as the characters that they that the
Yeah.
authors are writing about because they've never met them. You know, I think it's huge for the children to know the difference between consumers and creators because I've asked the question, who benefits more, the consumer or the creator? When I've gone
Mhm.
into classrooms, and some students have said the consumer benefits more because they don't understand the creative part of it. They don't understand that Spider-Man, the last Spider-Man movie, has made over $1 billion, and it started as a book. you know,
Right.
they don't understand that Shrek is worth over $4 billion, the franchise, and it started as a book. A lot of them don't even realize that it was a book, and when I show them the original Shrek book cover, they're like, "Wait a minute, it looks nothing like what the movie came out to be." But they have to learn that being a consumer, when everybody has their vices that they enjoy, but don't let that be the only thing. Don't only go to consume and not create and have a passion and start to put your mark in the world.
Yeah. No, it is important because we're not seeing it. And you're right about meeting authors. I remember in my hometown, there's a very famous poet and
Hmm.
songwriter that came out of the hometown. Of course, everybody's talking about him, but I've never actually met him. We know there's somebody that came out of it. It's a
Right.
very
Yeah.
small town in the middle of nowhere, but you've never actually met anybody. So it's true.
Yeah.
When you don't have that contact, it's not going to come to
Yeah.
mind.
You're
And
not gonna
so,
know. You're not gonna know that you can do it.
yeah,
Because you're not
it's
seeing the person.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in
And
your
they can.
opinion, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
And it's continuing. It's continuing today. I go to a lot of schools, and I'm the first author that they meet.
Yeah. I think it's important for them to meet to see that it's a real person. You
Right,
see celebrities on TV and you're like, okay, it's just they're on TV. But when you get to actually meet somebody, it
right.
changes the dynamic. You have that contact there that changes everything. And for those
Tangible.
who, yeah,
Mm,
exactly, it's
mhm.
tangible. And for those who do kind of like writing, but they're kind of hiding it because it's not something everybody talks about in school. At least to meet an author, it just opens up the world all of a sudden. So it's really
That
cool.
that's important that you said that too, because youngsters they're around their peers and they don't want to be ridiculed.
Yeah.
Not and their peers don't real well, some peers do, but that's a whole different topic. But most of their peers don't realize that they're a genius.
Mhm.
So you're kind of limiting yourself or dimming your light because of your peers because you haven't met anybody that's doing what it is that you have a passion about. But now if you see somebody and meet somebody, now you're not going to care what those peers are thinking, because let's say they meet Kevin Blaize, they're going to say, oh, Kevin Blaize is doing it. I don't care what you guys are thinking or laughing about. I know I can do it too later for you guys. So it has a lot of a lot of folds to it when they meet authors and building up the confidence. Adults also. When
Yeah.
I go into schools and I talk to students at the end of the class, the teachers pull me to the side So
Hmm.
many teachers and like, oh my gosh, I've always had this idea. I've wanted to do this. I've never done it. And the part of the issue is like, you guys are instructors of these kids. You have to have confidence so that you can portray confidence to the youngsters. But not only the youngsters, the adults that want to write also can jump into the fray.
Yeah, no, it's true. That contact really does make a difference. And it's interesting because, yeah, I can see teachers approaching you and saying, okay, how do I?
Yeah,
Everybody has a book in them. They've been thinking about it for years. And now
yeah,
when you actually meet somebody who's doing it, it becomes realistic. And so
right.
it changes the whole thing. Yeah. In your opinion, because you're visiting schools, you're in schools quite a bit as well, is what role do you think that schools need to take on to get kids interested in writing?
I think they need to learn the business. I
Yeah.
really think they need to learn the business because when I'm talking to them about certain things, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Like
Mhm.
I'm trademarked. I think it's important for when you're talking about writing that the children need to learn the business side of it to protect their work. Like I have I have a creative writing course. I'm not even sure if I mentioned that to you or not, but I have an introduction to creative writing course. And in the course I teach the components of creative writing, but I also teach NDAs, trademarks, copyrights, so that the children know that this is even though you're enjoying it, that you have to learn the business side so that it doesn't get taken from you because it will get taken from you. So I
Yeah.
I believe the schools need to learn the the monetary value of creative writing, what it turns into. So now they can say these options are available to their students because
Yeah.
the world is shrinking. So we need to present more options and opportunities to them. But if the schools don't understand that the film industry is a 285 billion-dollar industry, they're not going to know how to present it to their students. So I feel they need to get educated on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That is such a big thing because even the publishing world has completely changed. It's not, write a book and let's just hope people will like it and get it.
Right.
There's so much more to it now, and yeah, that's kind of what I mentioned in my book as well. The world is accessible to everybody now,
Right.
so there's so much more that can be done with that. And it
Hmm.
is important to talk about it, and that's what I like your point of view, your angle on it is very realistic. It's not just writing a book. The work starts when you have the book in your hand, and there's so much
Right.
more you can do with it. We can go over the details of what you do teach. Before we go on with that, I just wanted to ask you, how can what is the one thing, let's say, that parents or teachers could do today, or start doing to kind of help children become creators as opposed to
Mhm.
consumers, like kind of get them into it.
They have to really know the child.
Mhm.
You have a lot of parents that would run around to sporting events every week for the child from 5 years old to 18 years old, and they never really know the child's true talent.
Yeah.
I was at an event in Barnes and Nobles last week, and they had I was on a panel and I was speaking, and I was talking about the same uh, situation with the children with their writing, protecting their work. So after the panel, I went back up to my station, and a mother brought her son over, and she's like, "He's been writing for years, and I never once thought to put his work into production." She has a friend, a really good friend. I forgot the author's name, out of Atlanta, sells a lot of books, and
Mhm.
they never thought to take the son's writing serious. She started naming the different things that he has done, and it's a classic case of not really knowing your children. She said
Mhm.
she takes him to the sporting events. He's pretty good. He's actually one of the students that are pretty good because a lot of times the parents are taking the children and the children aren't very good. So but he's actually pretty good. So I told her, the first thing she needs to do is to copyright his work. But they have to know the child. You know, but again, it's them only parents only seeing music and athletes and thinking that that's what we're limited to. They box the child in when they should really get to know the child and see their talents and then invest in their talents.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very good point because we're so used to the same sports, even in the sports
Hmm.
world. It's always kind of
Hmm.
the same sports, just to kind of run and get to know the child and know exactly where to bring them in. It doesn't have to be writing because, like you say, there's the movie industry, there's the animated industry. Like if they're great at drawing, that can be
Right.
an option as
Yeah.
well
Yeah.
to do the graphic design for the books or for the animated series. Or so
Yeah.
it's a huge world out there
Yeah.
so much that could be done.
And content is king. You have people that come home on a Friday evening and don't leave the couch until it's time to go to bed Sunday night. You know, what are they doing? They're watching content.
Yeah.
So if you can create, you're gonna get opportunities. You're gonna create options, and it needs to be shown to the students.
Mhm. It would be so much more interesting too in writing classes and any of the language classes if
Yeah.
they actually have they see like you always have that question, well, what am I going to use this for? Well, this is what you can make billions. How about
Yeah.
that?
Right. And
Yeah.
the teachers don't know that are teaching the writing classes. They don't know. They might have just had a passion of their own of writing and never really dove into the business side of it, because I sure didn't know that this is what writing can lead to. When I first started writing, it's in my trial and error and being self-published and an independent author that I realized, wait a minute here, this is much bigger than I ever thought. So
Yeah.
the teachers are teaching something that they like, but they don't know how to expound on it because they don't really know the behind the scenes, the business side of it. And definitely kids, they hear those dollar signs, like their eyes are going to open wide, especially if they like doing it.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. Before we get into the business side of it, because you do have the business side of it, can you kind of tell us about your books a little bit? I
Oh,
know you're with your series. Just talk about your books, and then we'll get into what it is that you do and what you teach.
okay, all right. I have a fictional series. It's about dogs against wolves battling for rulership over the forest. All the other animals join in on what side they think is going to win or what side they're forced to join in on. Takes place in a mystical forest, untouched by humans. If you like action, suspense, thriller, it's a page turner. A love story is involved. I've been getting a lot of great reviews, and I also have some beautiful illustrations on the inside. Um, the thing that impressed me the most with the reviews that I've gotten.
Mhm.
People that actually read it, and because it's a lot for somebody to stop to hear what you have to say, purchase your book, read it, and then send a review. So I
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, if they do actually get a chance to read it, they'll be really impressed with it. There's a lot of characters in the book, so the reader has a lot of characters to choose who they would fall in love with their as their favorite character, which I thought was important as well. A lot of action in the book. It's definitely a page turner, and
Mhm.
I've read book one about 7 or 8 times already, and every time I read it, I end off with a smile on my face. So book one and two are out right now. Three is in my head. I'll probably start it the year after next because I have some other stuff that I'm working on. But
Mhm.
it's I went out on the pavement a lot with my books, and I was always asked about this book called Call of the Wild. So
Okay.
I had never heard of it until I went out with my book. So finally I said, you know what? I was already finished with book two. I said, let me take it in and read it. And Call of the Wild was actually on school curriculums all over in the States at one point. So I read it and I was like, okay, that was a really good book. And I said, if they liked Call of the Wild, they're gonna love my Dogs of the Wild. So the goal is to try to get it the same way Call of the Wild was is.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, I can see that working really well in schools as well because it allows the reader to create that world. It's like that
Mhm.
everybody will see the world differently. You can start some really interesting conversations in school as well to see
Yeah.
how their take on the story, which is really great. All right, so talk to us about your programs and the work that you do in schools, so you can help kind of uh, fuel that passion of writing that the students may have.
Okay. The program came about by just realizing that we're lacking something in the schools. You know, they have writing courses, but they don't they don't really touch on what needs to be touched if you want to become a writer. Like they don't talk about marketing.
Yeah.
You as an author, you know that if there's no marketing, there's no crowd, you know. So,
Mhm.
and in general, I think schools need to talk on marketing. They need to talk on things that are business, have a business backing behind it.
Yeah.
So I talk about marketing in the book. So when your book, what happened was as I said, I hit the pavement a lot with my books, and I have spoken to more authors than the average Joe because of where I've gone with my books. You know, so many hundreds and hundreds of authors or desiring to be authors have passed by, and
Mhm.
what I realize is one, they're all on Amazon. Two, they don't have their own website. And three, they don't have physical copies of their books. When I met you, I was able to grab a book right from you, as opposed to having to go to Amazon and get a book. I got it right from you because you had copies of your book. A lot of
Yeah.
authors don't have that. So now Amazon can be a great tool for them, but they're putting their book on Amazon and thinking that's the end of the
Mhm.
story. And then they're not selling any books and they think that, wait a minute, maybe this wasn't for me. They may have an amazing story, but they just didn't understand the marketing behind it. About marketing, I talk about trademarks. As I mentioned earlier, I'm trademarked and you want to protect your work. You know, nobody can use my image or likeness without my permission. You know, and the fines are actually pretty high for
Mhm.
infringing on somebody's trademark. You know, the students need to learn that so that they also don't infringe on somebody's trademark with their work. It's very, very important. I talk about NDAs. The very first thing I do, because when I get to the class, the very first thing I do is I make them all make me sign an NDA so that they know that we're in business. We're doing business here. Even though we're going to have a good time, we're doing business because they all are going to complete. It's an 8 week course and it's once a week for 8 weeks. And by the end of the 8 weeks, they should have the first draft of their novel done. Then
Oh, wow.
on we vote on which novel we like the best, and that's the one that I will publish for them. You know, I'm not going to do every single student's book because a lot of students aren't going to take it serious. But I think if you have a couple of that are taking it real serious, we need to put the effort in and
Mhm.
the work behind them, you know, and show them that we can really do something with this. But the first thing they do is they make me sign an NDA so that they know that their idea is protected and it's not going to go anywhere. So we talk NDAs, we talk trademarks, we also talk copyrights. You know,
Mhm.
you want to copyright your work so that it's protected because the big boys, they don't want to pay for anything. You know, they want as much profit as possible. So you can come along with your nice manuscript and you hand it over to them, and you're thinking good, heart, warm feelings inside, and they're sharks. You know, they're gonna take it, and you'll never hear from them again. Next thing you'll see your idea on Netflix or on the big screen somewhere. So
Yeah.
we want to be able to protect their work. I talk to them about famous litigation lawsuits that have come down the pipeline. There's a famous hip hop artist named Rick Ross, and
Mhm.
his name he stole from somebody that was in jail. The guy was supposed to be in jail for life, and he taught himself to read in jail, realized that he was sentenced incorrectly, got his story to a lawyer, got out, and then sued the rapper to get his name back, and he couldn't get his name back because he had a
Um,
felony. You know, so I mix it up with education, the
mhm.
the value, the monetary value that's involved, uh, current event topics that they can relate to, so that it's not just robotic. I think a lot of things that they're being taught is pretty robotic, you know. So just I could rumble on all day about it, you know, but just a little taste of what the course has in it.
Yeah, and it's good to give them all the angles, the good, the
Right,
bad, and the ugly, because
right,
it is a real thing. There's a very famous person right now who's getting hit for her book. She's made such a huge wave with her new book, only to find out that she had taken the idea from a young woman who's been just she's doing social media, so she's just posting her journey using that same title and the same kind of philosophy behind it. And that author was actually following that young lady. And now
Wow.
this book came out, so that was a big hit on that. And I'm not sure it's in the process of this happened like within this month. So yeah, it's real and it's from every angle. And like you say, how do you protect yourself? How do you copyright yourself? Depending on what life throws at you, you need to be ready for it. And what's your take on AI? That is such a huge topic right now with authors. Even in schools, it's a huge thing about getting their schoolwork done with AI. What is your take on AI and creative writing? What should we be looking out for that?
That's an excellent question. I was at a school board meeting night before last, and I they have the public comment. So they give
Hmm.
me 2 minutes. I get 2 minutes to present what it is that I have to present. So when I finished, the the president of the board was like, "Oh yeah, this is great. Especially with the AI, the students can get a lot done." And I had to let them know. I said, "There's no shortcuts in creative writing. There's
Hmm.
absolutely no shortcuts in creative writing. One, if you put your work on Chat GPT, you can't copyright it.
Yeah,
So anybody that's telling a creative writer to use Chat GPT doesn't really understand the business of it.
yeah,
You can't put your stuff in Chat GPT and copyright it. So what happens, let's say you put it in there and the big boys get a hold of it and it's an excellent idea and they're paying their writers to write, like they're getting paid to write. Meanwhile, somebody that's just starting is still working their 9 to 5 and a second job, can't write as fast as the big
right.
boys are paying somebody to write. So now your
Yeah,
idea, it may not, they may not even do it anything close to what you wanted it to become, but the idea is gone because you put it out there and you can't copyright it. Another website is Spotify. You cannot,
hmm,
they can use any of your work that you put on there and they don't have to compensate you. Alignment is another one. So you have to be careful with using these devices, these systems, I guess we would call them. Another thing is for your artwork in your books.
hmm,
There's litigation going on with Getty and AI because the AI is not creating the artwork from scratch. It's taking images from different places and putting it together. So if they have the hardware to put the images together, they're going to have the hardware to say, wait, you took that image from my stuff. And now it's going to be problems later on down the line. My Illustrator, or if I don't even use my Illustrator, if I use somebody else, if he's too busy, I tell him, you can't use AI in my work. It's
yeah,
great for fun and games, but when you're taking this serious, when you have a vision and a plan, you can't do it. The writers and actors strike a couple of years back was
mm,
big on this, and again, people don't understand the business side of it. They don't really understand what the writers and actors were striking about. It was about images and likenesses,
mm,
so I tell every creative writer, stay away from the AI with your stuff that you plan to take somewhere. You know, it's very,
yeah.
very, very important.
It is so important because I'm in the nonfiction world and it's the same. I mean, a lot of people thinking, well, I could use AI to kind of get the storyline going or, to structure the book, but you do have to be careful. There's certain things you can use it for, but not related to your book.
Right,
It's
right,
that you can use it for marketing. That they
right.
do great things to give you ideas on how to market it. But yeah, it's a tricky and it's important to teach kids that because they're in it now and it's just so easily accessible to them that to make them understand that you can use AI, but just realize that all the work you're putting in is not technically not yours. It's up for grabs.
Right,
So
right.
it's important to protect them. It can be overwhelming in that world. Like we've talked about this before. The work starts once the book is in your hand.
Hmm.
Can you kind of talk to us about what's next? What are the projects that you are working on right now?
I have a book that I finished. I did my editing on it, and I sent it to the professional editor. To the first chapter, I sent it to her, so I'm waiting for her to get back to me. And I also discussed with one of my illustrators. I have a couple of illustrators that I use, so I discussed with her the book cover. So now this is normally this is backwards because I normally have the book cover way in advance. The book is finished and I don't have the book cover yet. So I'm promoting the book with just the words of the book on the front cover.
Wow.
Because I just want to put it out there. But that book is called "Is Your Son Ready to Leave Home?" And
Mm,
obviously, what I spoke to you about with my son moving to Alaska, um, that was the inspiration for that book. So basically, it's young men, what they need to be aware of when they step out into the real world. When they're leaving the nest.
mhm.
And from the people that I've spoken to, like I'm getting a lot of interest in that kind of book because it's going to be very helpful. I talk
Yeah.
about friendships, certain things to look out for. There are friends that are jealous if you're progressing, and these are things that nobody tells us as younger folks. So when it happens, it's kind of comes out of left field and like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
I thought you were my friend. But there's certain things that you can pick up on and see, wait a minute, this person hasn't really been my friend. They've said certain things, they've made certain jokes, and it's I don't really want to call it a self-help, but I guess it's an awareness book.
Mhm.
The opioid and drug use that seems to be pushed on the youngsters these days, to be aware of the repercussions. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited, really excited about that book. I also
That's
have a Jason Bourne type book. I'm 13 chapters in on that one, and I know how it's going to end. I know what the I'm excited about that one. The Jason Bourne. So I write how I read. I don't stick to one genre. I read whatever I'm in the mood to read. That's how I read, and I write the same way. Yeah, so it's interesting. But those are the two projects that I have coming out now, and I'm also going to be doing a book and wine event in we're aiming for September. So,
mhm.
reading a good book with a glass of wine is a great thing. So I'm combining the two, and
Yeah,
hopefully we'll take that statewide in the near future. So those are three things that I got going on right now.
that's really good. That book about the son being ready to leave the nest is so important to have. There's not a lot out there,
Right.
especially for young men. I find there's really not a lot. They kind of left to fend
So
for
wing
themselves.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and as parents, sometimes it's all I'm a boy mom, and it's the same.
Hmm.
Our children are at the same age, so it's to get them ready for that world, and
Right.
yeah, the realities of it. And I like that idea of friendships and what to look out for. So that's great. Before you share how people can get in touch with you or follow you to see what's coming up, I just wanted to kind of make a note as well for parents or teachers who may be overwhelmed with all the work that's behind creative writing and how we could take it a step further. Programs like the one that Kevin has is great to welcome into a school because parents and teachers specifically are overworked. So having to do the research and having to figure out how am I going to present this to the class, and you have somebody who does this. And you can do it with your eyes closed, so you can come into the class. It changes the dynamic of the class, and then the students are all motivated to follow the teacher afterwards. So I'm
Right.
just putting it out there. Somebody who's worked in school settings for 20 plus years. It's great to welcome a guest to come in and do it. And again, a real author that's doing it with a tangible book in their hands and talks about what more you can do with that book once it's out. So it's a great thing. You can look into it as well. It's really it just brings a lot more to your classroom that way. So I just wanted to throw it out there. But before we share all of your coordinates, Kitty, I do have that question. I've warned you ahead of time that I ask it. I promised a little girl. I promised a little girl I would ask everybody I interview, and then that question is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
This is such a great question, but I don't ever plan on growing up. I'm a
Ah,
Toys R Us kid.
yes, I love it.
I think that is very, very important that we hold on to the things that we did when we were young. The joyfulness, the playing in the snow, the just being cheerful. I think it's very, very important to hold on to it. I've been asked so many times, how come you're such in such a good mood? I don't want to be the grumpy old man, so I'm a Toys R Us kid for life, and I'm never growing up.
I love that. That's why I love asking that question, because we shouldn't have to grow up. I'm the same. I always say I'm a kid trapped in an old lady's body because it's the same. You just have to have fun. You need to enjoy it. Life is hard enough as it is.
Hmm.
So why make it hard? I like that. I don't want to grow up with Toys R Us kids, and we just kind of dated ourselves into where we sit in the generations there. Now we're gonna have
Hopefully it makes a comeback, so we we won't seem like we're outdated. I heard some rumors about it coming back. So
really. Oh no,
yeah.
we've gone full circle.
Toys R
That's
Us
hilarious.
kid, what's that? What do you mean Toys R Us kid? Yeah.
Nobody understands that except us. I love it. Now I have this song stuck in my head, but that's okay. Um, how can people reach you, follow you, contact you if they do want to bring in your program into the schools, or even community centers or public libraries offer some great opportunities sometimes, so you would be a great person to have on. How can they reach you or follow you?
Okay, my Facebook is Dogs of the Wild. Kevin Blaize, I'll pop up. My Instagram is at Dogs of the Wild Series. That's at Dogs of the Wild Series. And my email address is authorkevinblaize@gmail.com. That's authorkevinblaize@gmail.com. And my website is www.dogsofthewild.com. And I'm actually revamping the website. I'm excited about that. I haven't touched it since 2021. So I'm revamping it. So I'm gonna add the services that I added that I can present also on the website. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. And I will add all of that in the description so people can have access to it and they can reach out to you. So thank you again. I could talk to you all day about this stuff. It's so important work. It's important to have these conversations. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today to kind of shed some light on that. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you taking your time out to have me on. Thank you very much.
That's great. And for everybody watching, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to whichever channel you're listening or watching from. Don't forget to go check out Kevin's angles as well. Make sure you start following him so you can see when his new books are coming out. And until next time, stay safe, stay awesome, and we'll talk soon.